Hello, hey folks, hey everyone. My name's Dylan. I use he, him pronouns. So a little bit about me. So I'm a youth residential rehabilitation worker at Coonabin Wellways, which is where I am now, in beautiful sunny Warrnambool. So I study psychological science at Deakin University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's session. Where have all the rural youth workers gone? So with targeted programs, short-term funding, burnout and shifting expectations, generalist youth workers seem to have all but disappeared in regional Victoria. Where are they? And what gaps are being left in their absence? Should we and can we get them back? So briefly, the format of today's session will be as follows. We'll begin by listening to reflections on the topic by two experts. And then we'll move into breakout discussions surrounding key themes. Questions can be submitted for our speakers to answer using the chat function in Zoom, and I'd strongly encourage you to do so, as it can make for a really sort of interesting, great dynamic dialogue. Alrighty, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, Rhiannon Jennings, YACVic's very own regional youth coordinator.
Thanks, Dylan. Hey, everyone. I'm Rhi Jennings, the Rural Development Coordinator for YACVic. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you all today from the beautiful Wamba country on the Murray River. Let me firstly acknowledge and pay my deepest respect to elders past, present, and across all the lands that I guess we're zooming from today. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. The role of the Rural Development Coordinator, as it would suggest, sits across the rural and remote region of the Southern Mallee here in Victoria. We're supporting young people in the youth sector. So this session is one of a particular passion of mine. We've had an incredible opportunity to support the research of Victoria University today, providing vital insights into the challenges experienced across regional and rural remote Victoria in securing suitably skilled generalist youth workers and to explore just exactly where they've all gone. Joining us here today are Dr. Karen Hart and Dr. Fiona Mcdonald from Victoria University. Dr. Karen Hart is the course chair of youth work and criminal justice at Victoria University. Karen is an active researcher and special interest in the needs and experience of justice-involved young people. Karen's held senior roles in youth work and non-profit leadership for over 25 years, including most recently as CEO of the Co-located Youth Service Centre, the Visi Cares Hub in Melbourne's West. Dr. Fiona Mcdonald is a Senior Research Fellow at VU and Research Project Coordinator at YACVic, having joined our rural team in 2020 to work on bushfire research. Fiona's research with children and young people focuses on how they negotiate the social and cultural influences of our global world within the local spaces and places. Fiona's research has explored a range of contemporary issues, including bushfire recovery, cyberbullying, youth justice, inclusive education, wellbeing and belonging. So we welcome Dr. Karen Hart and Fiona Mcdonald.
Thank you, Rhi. So great to be here today. I'm just going to do a very brief intro to myself, and then Karen will do the same, and then we're just going to pose a couple of questions between each other to open up this conversation today, because what we're really keen to do is have this a really interactive session. So while we might have been very nicely called experts, you're actually the experts in the field, so we really want to hear from you. So I should say I use she and her pronouns, and I also want to acknowledge that I'm coming today from Wurundjeri country, and to pay my respects to elders past and present and those Aboriginal people who are with us today, and to acknowledge that sovereignty for these lands has never been ceded, and there's no justice without First Nations justice, So this will and always will be Aboriginal land. Also wanted to paint a picture. I'm not a young person, but I'm wearing the very traditional black stereotypical attire of Melbourne, although I've got a blue top and pink glasses, so hopefully that sort of brightens that image up a bit today. My research really focuses on what I would consider the beneficiaries of the work that youth workers do, which is young people and children. And I've done that across a range of areas within youth justice, safety, breakfast clubs in schools, cyberbullying and bullying, health and wellbeing, within my role as a researcher at Vic Uni. But then I extended that last year when I jumped on board with YACVic and undertook bushfire research work alongside Dermot Carr and Sam and the rural team, looking at the experiences of young people from the 2019-2020 bushfires and the ensuing pandemic, and really sort of getting a real view of what's it like on the ground for young people, and where are those opportunities and gaps for youth workers and people trained with youth work skills and using youth work participation and principles can actually make a difference in those spaces. So I really saw that on the ground, and I'm really interested to share that and to hear how that works from a youth worker's point of view, because I have much more of that sort of lens of young people and children. But I'm going to throw to Karen to introduce herself.
Thanks, Fiona. Hi, everybody. It gives me a great pleasure to be here today. And what a super job YACVic and YACVic sponsors have done to get this conference off the ground and really getting it rocking and rolling over the last day and a half. It's been terrific listening to everybody, particularly the young people, hearing their voices loud and clear about issues that really matter to them. My name is Karen Hart, and as Ree mentioned, I'm the course chair of youth work, criminal justice and community development at Victoria University. And I use the pronouns she and her. I also want to acknowledge the depth and the richness of our First Nations people's culture. I pay my absolute respect to their elders, past, present, and the emerging leaders, many of who are part of this conference over the last couple of days. Even after 22 years, I'm learning every day about the richness and depth of the Aboriginal culture, and I'm absolutely humbled and privileged to be living within that culture. So thanks so much today for joining us on our session. Where have all the youth workers gone? It is indeed a very pertinent question, and one that requires, I guess, us throwing to those experts in rural and regional areas to give us some sound feedback on the reality of what is happening in rural and regional Victoria. And so Fiona and myself are going to have a little bit of toing and froing, attempting to have a stab at giving you some insights, I guess, into what is actually going on. And then we'll have an opportunity for you guys to respond to a couple of questions that we've constructed so that we can be informed by you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, so I'm going to pose the first question. Have youth workers disappeared in rural and regional Victoria? Or has youth work been more consumed into other specialised roles such as mental health, drug and alcohol services and others? So that's an interesting question. Have they gone, or have they just been lost?
This is an interesting question. So I think it's a combination of youth work general practice being eroded in rural and regional Victoria for a number of reasons. And it's also more complicated than youth work roles simply being subsumed into other specialised roles, as there is a lack of those as well in rural and regional Victoria. So if I start with the first part of the question, have youth workers disappeared? Yes, many generalist youth work roles have been lost primarily due to funding cuts across the sector, and there are fewer opportunities to secure employment into generalist youth service organisations, as they too have lost funding over the last number of years. And there are a number of contributing factors to this. So there's issues around recruitment and retention of youth workers. Previous research highlights the issues of poor recruitment and retention, including attracting qualified youth workers who face poor job security, short-term, part-term, and casual contracts. And this signals poor career opportunities and a lack of investment in professional development for rural and regional youth workers. There is a reluctance to want to be a rural or regional youth worker, and this, I don't mean to diminish some of the fabulous work and some of what we've heard over the last couple of days around great youth work being done in rural and regional areas, but often in small communities, and I'm from rural Ireland myself, so I can relate to this, there is a lack of anonymity, and you kind of have to straddle this dual relationship with people in small communities where youth workers may know or recognize young people and the young people's parents or relatives from other settings, which can create issues around confidentiality and privacy of young people's business. And it can be difficult for young people to see the youth worker or access services without being observed, which again raises issues around stigma for young people accessing services. Young people, including those who desire to become youth workers, are living longer at home with their parents. So there's the affordability issue of keeping young adults at home and affordability for young people to become independent. You know, they may be compelled to go to the city to get a tertiary degree and stay there for maybe 10, 15, 20 years, and then return to rural or regional Victoria, and maybe likely to take up a management position. There's also changing expectations of youth work. So, you know, the expectations of the youth work sector is changing. This naturally impacts what is happening in rural and regional Victoria. There's a growing expectations from employers for youth workers to hold a degree at minimum, to be able to not only secure positions in both government and non-government organisations, but it has also become an imperative to enable youth workers to climb their career ladder into more senior positions. And so having formal qualifications in the sector means that those who don't, even though they may be doing a great job and have a range of excellent competencies and skills, are increasingly competing against those who have formal qualifications and certification. And this is changing the sector both in metropolitan and rural and regional areas. And so I guess the benefits of obtaining a tertiary education, providing a greater chance of employment and job variety and security and things like better pay and conditions, is a draw card for many regional or rural and regional youth workers. And if that is lacking in that area and making it inaccessible for them to actually secure a degree, then obviously that's going to be a barrier, because they're going to have to move to metropolitan areas to achieve that. And I guess this all makes youth work more competitive, but optimistically it's balanced with professionalising the youth work sector. And as with any growth industry, of which youth work is, where young people's concerns and desires are being pushed to the forefront of our social justice, education and health policies, at least at state level, although we can do much, much better, we need the most competent and highly trained youth work practitioners on the front line response to those policies to enact change in those areas alongside young people. Management is also changing in youth work settings. You know, there's been a shift from youth workers moving from direct practice to further develop their supervisory and management skills. And then if we look at governance within the sector, it's only through having board members, councillors and ministers who have direct experience and knowledge of working with young people and being across their contemporary challenges and concerns where we will really be able to break ground. So again, that sort of buys into people becoming qualified and becoming really in tune with what is happening with young people, both in metropolitan and rural and regional Victoria. And just to conclude this first part of the question, there is a shift in the way that government departments and funding agencies and private philanthropists throughout Victoria have become almost obsessed with outcomes focused work. And that's having a significant influence on youth work practice, and it's changed the interpretation of the value of youth work. And this does not always sit comfortably with youth work values. I guess this doesn't take into consideration the immeasurable values of empowerment, encouragement, unconditional acceptance, optimism, youth-centered approach, being non-judgmental. These are, difficult things to measure, but these are the true values of youth work. And so funding has become tied to throughputs, outputs, and targets, and more about getting the job done and the program completed rather than measuring the quality of the youth work relationship and what is conferred to young people as a result of that in terms of the value of that relationship, walking alongside young people as they write and rewrite the narrative of their lives. And the second part of the question, has youth work been subsumed into other specialised roles? Yes, to an extent it has, not only in rural and regional Victoria, but also in metropolitan areas. And as we all know, youth work is a diverse practice, and so youth workers are employed in a whole range of settings, including health and wellbeing, school programs, drug and alcohol, and so on. And more recently in the statutory sector, which includes youth justice and out-of-home care and corrections, carrying out predominantly case management roles. And there's the additional diversity across the 13-year youth span from 12 to 25 years. And as we know, the needs and challenges impacting a 12-year-old are very different from those affecting a 25-year-old young person. And these diverse needs shape and influence the way youth work is delivered. And I've got a little bit more to say about that, but I feel that I'm running out of time and probably need to let Fiona ask her second question.
Yes, Karen, and time is because we're really, really keen to get everyone's input into the session. So the second question I will pose is around moving at sort of funding and governments, but what do you think are the additional attributes that youth workers themselves need to possess to work in regional and rural areas? So if you've got a quick answer to that one, then we can throw to everyone else.
Great. So I think whilst there are significant similarities in young people's needs in both urban and rural and regional areas, they manifest differently for young people in rural and regional areas for a number of reasons. And youth workers need to be familiar with what those differences are. But I suppose the obvious attribute first and foremost is the need for youth workers to be passionate about where they live and enjoy living in the country. And of course, if you're from the country, only you know really and have got a deep insight into the needs of smaller communities. So I think youth workers are expected to do so much more with so much less funding, less resources for young people in rural and regional areas. And there's an expectation that you do that across large geographical areas. So you need to be willing to travel because for young people, there's less access and proximity to youth services in general, and more specifically to services that meet the diverse needs of rural and regional young people to be able to connect. I mean, in terms of mental health and isolation, there is a greater potential for isolation because of how dispersed the population is. And this is marked by high levels of depression and anxiety. Whilst, that is shared by young people in urban areas as well, the geographical areas really compound that experience. And so somebody mentioned yesterday in the networking that we as youth workers are proactive in encouraging young people to put up their hand early about their needs and concerns, but not having the right services to respond in a timely way makes that really frustrating for both your youth workers and young people.
Great, thanks, Karen. That's a lot of really amazing insights. So now we really are going to throw to the group. I'm going to go back to Dylan to help send everyone out to breakout rooms. Thanks, Dylan.
Alrighty, great. Yeah, thank you so much for your insights there, Karen. So as Fiona just said, we're going to move into breakout discussions now. So there are going to be 4 key questions we'll be considering in these sessions, and these will be posted in the chat for your reference. So the first one being, what would incentivize you as a youth worker to work in rural and regional Victoria? The second one being, if $1 million was allocated to each rural and regional local government area in Victoria, how would you spend it towards youth work practice to assist young people? The third question being, do you think youth work practice is the solution to challenges faced by rural and regional people? And why or why not? And lastly, the professionalisation of the sector has contributed to a hidden youth workforce embedded in specialised services such as mental health, drug and alcohol, and other services. What impact do you think this has had on the professional youth work in rural and regional Victoria? So yeah, we'll jump into breakout rooms to address all of those really important questions.
Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. I just wanted to give you a message to allow some time for everybody to arrive. We now have an opportunity to engage in some Q&A with Fiona and Karen. What we'd ask you to do is, if you have a question, we'd ask that you perhaps put your little Zoom hand up. There's a function there at the bottom of your screen, and Karen and Fiona will get to you. We're also going to take some of that feedback from your mentee and be able to discuss that in this Q&A opportunity. If you have any issues with popping your hand up there, please just drop a little comment in the chat there, and we've got some great techies with us today. They'll help you out.
And Ree, can I say too, sorry to jump in,
Yes,
it can even be if anyone wants to make a comment to sort of open up something that they might have discussed in the breakout rooms, as well as asking questions, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So have we got anybody there? I'm just having a little look across now. Oh, Jay from CMY has got his hand up there. Can we get Jay's microphone off so he can ask a question of Fiona and Karen? Hi, Jay, welcome.
Hi guys, thanks for having me today. Yeah, we were discussing in our breakout rooms, one of the questions Alyssa posted was like, if you had $1 million, what would you do? So I rose, yeah, we would love that for youth support. We know it's about funding, but you know, one of the things I said was ongoing funding, because a lot of the programs I think I've seen is that it's very halted. So when that stops, it doesn't go on. And we were talking about multicultural communities in rural areas. And one of the points I wanted to bring up is, does the group think there's enough support for multicultural young people in the rural areas? And is there enough youth workers from multicultural backgrounds to support the young people who are newly arriving or need that support where they can't find it from youth workers who are already there?
Shall I take that one? Jay, what a great question. So I've got a couple of views on this. It's not grounded in any real evidence, just from my, I suppose, experience of managing the hub in Sunshine, of which Centre for Multicultural Youth was a key partner of all of that. In terms of response to young people from diverse backgrounds, ethnically diverse backgrounds, I don't think we've even got enough services in metropolitan Melbourne, never mind rural and regional Melbourne, and there's an absolute need for it because of the, I guess, migration of called communities out into rural and regional areas like Shepparton, Ballarat, and probably further beyond, certainly in southeastern remote parts of Victoria. And so in terms of those young people, needing to be responded to effectively, there is definitely a call for culturally and linguistically diverse youth workers to be there within those communities. And at the very least, for youth workers being trained up in cultural competence, cultural sensitivity, to be able to work effectively with those young people. But that is a definite gap that that needs to be responded to.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question, Jay, and great answer, Karen. We've got Grex, has their hand up. If we could throw a mic to her. There she is.
Thank you. Yes, hello, it is Grex, thank you. My question is, I see more and more funding, especially in rural and regional Victoria, tied to, social impact measurement. Like, it's not just about outputs, it's not just about bums on seats, but it's about impact. But, impact measurement can be costly and can be inaccessible sometimes in rural and regional Victoria. Do either of you have any tips on how to make that more accessible for regional and rural Victoria to assist in, getting more of that ongoing funding and measuring your impact, I guess, more than measuring just attendance?
So shall I take that? So Grex, do you mean getting in impact experts to measure the quality and quantity of effective youth work that's being done in rural and regional areas? So funding to be able to engage experts in carrying out those types of measurements?
Yes, but also sort of attributing the fact that that can sometimes be inaccessible. So are there other ways we can measure our impact without having to go, through those agencies and all that, knowing that, rural funding is quite limited sometimes?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is a hot topic. I know that companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte have got a pro bono aspect to their work, where a percentage of their work goes directly to charitable organizations. And depending, of course, on what the theme or current interest is, it may be that one of those big city organizations could be engaged to do some pro bono work, in-kind work in rural and regional areas. You could always knock on the door of universities to see if people are kind enough to throw you a lifeline in that direction as well, because there's a lot of expertise embedded in universities. And I think part of our important work is giving back to not only rural and regional communities, but all communities, in terms of the sector and the capacity building of the sector.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Grex. Thank you so much. We have very limited time. I would encourage everyone to please, in the chat here, we have a link to the Menti questions. Please jump into Menti and record your responses now and later this afternoon. Those responses will go back to Fiona and Karen. I might be pushing my luck with one last question, but a consistent theme for both of you is, as a sector, how do we advocate for a different funding model? It's come up in my group. I'm sure it's come up in plenty of other groups to improve youth work as a profession.
I'm going to let you finish up, Karen, with that one as well.
All right. Oh my word, this is a biggie. Well, this would be the holy grail, wouldn't it, of what we need to happen. And nothing works more effectively than collaboration and cohesion within a sector to move mountains. And so we've got our very own YACVic, we've got our youth advisory a group, or sorry, our Youth Workers Association. We've got a number of educational institutions. We've got some very big, important non-government organisations, as well as critical mass within our local government landscape. And so this is a whole of community ask. And certainly YACVic are kicking some goals in this direction. But we need to band together to formulate our questions and strike with the right people, ensuring that young people's voices are heard loud and clear in our ask. So there's no easy answer. It's keep continuing to knock on people's doors, shift away from our siloed and fragmented way that we're conducting ourselves and responding to young people's needs, and create a more consolidated front in terms of what we're really trying to say, to be able to put our money where our mouth is.
That's awesome. Thank you, Karen.
Alrighty, folks, and with that, I believe that's a wrap. So, Karen, Fiona, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and valuable insights with us today. I know I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure I probably speak for most everyone in saying that. And to all you who have taken the time to attend today's session, thank you so very much. It's been a really interesting and dynamic back and forth discussion, which is always fantastic. So you might notice there's a Menti link that has been or will be posted in the chat, where you can answer just a couple of questions around today's session. If you could do so, that would be so much appreciated. Feedback is crucial. Right, and with that, 1 hour break, take a rest, go and get some lunch, do whatever it may be, or you can attend a special interactive consultation session that Catherine is running, Catherine being YACVic CEO. So titled, What More Can YACVic Do for the Victorian Youth Sector, or Victorian youth workers even? Otherwise, please return at 2:15 for another exciting session on technology and innovation in youth work, with a special guest speaker, not to give too much away, from the Finland Centre of Excellence in Digital Youth Work. And with that, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.